There has been a shooting at a free speech event featuring cartoons of the Prophet Muhammad. Two gunmen armed with automatic weapons opened fire outside the Curtis Culwell Centre. The suspects are dead and a police officer has been hurt. There are concerns the gunmen's vehicles may contain explosives. On the phone with us, CNN producer Christopher Lett, who was at today's event in Garland, Texas, just outside Dallas. Christopher, right now you're inside the building. What more can you tell me?
I'm no longer inside the building, John. They've moved us to a media staging area just down the street from the building.
Okay, so explain what has happened in the last few hours. These two alleged gunmen in the vehicles drove up to this center that was hosting this exhibit of the Prophet Muhammad, and then a gunfire erupted.
Exactly. So, according to police, they opened fire. They were engaged by the law enforcement there on standby. From there, they told everyone who was still inside the event to go to the auditorium and usher the people who were outside to go back in. SWAT teams corralled all the people to get out, and as we moved on, we just waited until those who actually witnessed anything were separated, taken for their statements, and those who were there as guests who did not witness anything were taken to an undisclosed location. Media like myself were then sent to a staging area just down the street.
Okay, and what do you know about this keynote speaker who was advertised as having a prominent role at this exhibit?
Yes. So he is a politician from the Netherlands, Geert Wilders. Correct me if I'm wrong on the pronunciation, but he definitely had some things to say, basically echoing his solidarity with the movement to protect free speech in the West. A few of the things he said I can tell you now. He said, "We will never allow barbarism. We will never allow barbarism." I know my own experience and how dangerous it is. He spoke about how he's on the death lists of al-Qaeda, and he said new leadership is required to defend our freedom of speech and resist the ongoing Islamization of the West.
Okay, so Geert Wilders was on this al-Qaeda hit list. We have the wanted poster which al-Qaeda put out featuring Geert Wilders. So he was meant to be one of the key speakers at this exhibit of the Prophet Muhammad. And of course, as we know, any depiction of the Prophet Muhammad is considered blasphemy by Muslims. We do not know the identities or the ethnicity of those who were in fact involved in the shooting, who were driving the cars, who are now dead. But we do know that right now their vehicle is surrounded by police because there are concerns that there could in fact be explosives inside that vehicle.
ISIS claimed responsibility for an attack in Texas that left 2 people dead.
It's the first time the group, which frequently calls for attacks against the West, has claimed responsibility for one in the United States. CBS 2 political reporter Marcia Kramer has more live from the newsroom. Marcia.
Well, Chris and Mary, right now all Homeland Security officials are saying is that they are investigating the circumstances and the motives for the attack. And it is unclear if the 2 men involved had any actual connection to ISIS or ISIS wannabes, hoping to be accepted into the group. Nevertheless, ISIS is now calling the men, quote, 2 soldiers of the caliphate.
I can't imagine what went through his mind.
Sharon Soofi says her son Nadir was always deeply religious, but she never thought he would hurt anyone.
He was a practicing Muslim, but not in the extreme sense.
But now law enforcement officials are investigating whether Soofi and Elton Simpson were extreme, whether their attack on the Prophet Muhammad cartoon contest in Garland, Texas, was part of an ISIS terror plot. ISIS is now claiming credit. In a broadcast on its official radio channel, it referred to Soofi and Simpson, who wounded a security guard before police shot and killed them, as brothers. The announcement also warned of more attacks in the West. We say to the defenders of the cross, the United States, that future attacks are going to be harsher and worse. The Islamic State soldiers are going to inflict harm on you with the grace of God. The future is just around the corner. The broadcast gave no details of the Garland attack, and it is unclear at this time whether there was a true connection or the broadcast was opportunistic. What authorities do know is that moments before the attack, Simpson posted a tweet with the hashtag #TexasAttack and "May Allah accept us as Mujahideen." Mujahideen are jihadist guerrilla soldiers. Simpson was arrested in 2010 as part of a terror investigation and convicted of lying to the feds. He had recently been on the radar of law enforcement due to his social media posts, but there is no indication, officials said, he was plotting an attack. Soofi's mom believes Simpson orchestrated the Garland attack, not her son.
He's an intelligent kid. I mean, but to be convinced to do something like this, it's just beyond me.
Federal agents have been searching a Phoenix apartment complex where both men lived for clues in the case and if their ties, if any, to ISIS. Live in the newsroom, I'm Marcia Kramer, CBS 2 News.
Marcia, thank you.
Islamic State has claimed responsibility for an attack on an exhibition in Texas that featured cartoons of the Prophet Muhammad. The group made the announcement on its radio station. On Monday, 2 gunmen opened fire at security guards outside the venue. Police stepped in, killing both shooters. One of the suspects is believed to have pledged allegiance to Islamic State on Twitter shortly before the attack. Well, let's discuss this with Middle East journalist Dilly Hussein just now. Hi Dilly, thank you very much indeed for joining us this afternoon. Now, this is the first time Islamic State has claimed responsibility for an attack on US soil, but they haven't provided any evidence to back it up. Do you believe them?
I think that's a very important point that you made, that their claim hasn't been substantiated yet. For one of the attackers to pledge allegiance on Twitter doesn't really validate the fact that ISIS, or the group known as Islamic State, were behind the attack. I think what they've attempted to do here is perhaps strike fear in who they deem to be their enemies. But I don't think we're in a position to say that the group known as Islamic State were behind the attack.
Well, let's discuss the context and the history of all of this. We're going to have a look at some facts and figures just now, because the US has been criticised over its military involvement in the Middle East for decades now. Critics say Washington's operations, often reliant on drone strikes, have fuelled Islamic extremism, and this, the argument goes, has led to Islamic State fast becoming a threat to Europe and indeed America. What's your view? Is Islamic State a serious threat to Western countries?
Well, not necessarily. I don't believe it's a direct threat, an existential threat to the West in general. But what I will state, and these are the words of President Barack Obama in an interview with Vice News a month and a half ago, he said that the creation of the group known as ISIS was the unintended consequences of the US-led invasion. Here is a confession by the President of the United States, saying that their invasion of Iraq, which many have argued is an illegal war based on no intelligence, has created the group we now know as ISIS. So of course the US has a lot to play in what's happening in Syria and Iraq at the moment, and a continuation of drone attacks, which is not only targeting ISIS but other Syrian rebels, can be perceived as a provocation of a blowback at home.
Well, let's go back to the radio statement then, if indeed it is legitimate. It did also warn of more attacks to come. So should Americans be worried right now?
The thing is, look, what ISIS are now claiming on their radio station, whether it was yesterday or the day before, is not that different to what al-Qaeda have claimed or threatened before, or al-Shabaab or any other organization, terrorist organization or militia group. The issue at hand here is that such an event that took place in Garland, how conducive is that to society to practice that under free speech? We had individuals such as Gert Wilders and Pamela Geller, 2 individuals who are known Islamophobes that were banned from entering the UK. Surely that individuals such as those to be claiming that their event was a manifestation of free speech and an exhibition of art has to be questioned. Of course, Muslims generally overwhelmingly would not respond and would condemn such a reaction. However, we also must need to look at and learn from the lessons from Charlie Hebdo, and that is having cartoons which specifically target the most revered figure of the Islamic faith in a gratuitous, insulting way. How conducive is that to society? Is it really conducive? If it leads to issues such as the Charlie Hebdo shooting, such as the incident we had in Garland on Monday, Why do we not take heed from these? Even Mayor Athos, the mayor of Garland, even he highlighted that, look, there were some issues and some concerns raised once news of this event had got back to him, hence we heightened the security. So everyone knows that such events are provocative. It can lead to a potential blowback. If that's the case, if the US government really care about the safety and the welfare of their citizens, then why allow such events to take place, and furthermore for it to be led by individuals such as Pamela Geller and Gert Wilders? That's the real discussion we should be having. In the UK, we are yet to have a single attack from ISIS. Right, but then the security threat has been increased. We have draconian terror laws that have been put through, but we're yet to have a single terror attack on British soil from ISIS, and it's the same for America as well.
And let's hope that we don't, sir. But thank you very much indeed for your opinion. We do appreciate it. That's Middle East journalist Dilly Hussein. Well, the American Freedom Defense Initiative organised the controversial event, saying to promote American values like freedom of speech. But some civil rights campaigners doubt that was really the goal.
The American Freedom Defense Initiative is run by a woman named Pamela Geller, who's been in the kind of anti-Muslim hate business for at least 5 or 6 years. We have been tracking her since the controversies over the Ground Zero Mosque occurred in 2010. This is the latest iteration of an anti-Muslim hate group that she's had.
Well, Pamela Geller there has been involved in a series of controversial anti-Islam campaigns in the US over the years. She was banned from entering the UK 2 years ago because her support for anti-Muslim hate groups. Well, she had planned to attend a far-right rally there. One of the most notorious campaigns by Geller was an advert on public transport in Washington, D.C. Well, it showed Adolf Hitler sitting alongside a Palestinian leader and said that the Quran dictates that Muslims should hate Jews.
Good morning, everybody. I'm TJ Holmes.
And I'm Kana Whitworth with some of the top stories on this Wednesday, May 6th. And we start with Texas, the latest on Sunday's failed attack at the Muhammad cartoon contest. ISIS has claimed responsibility for it without offering any proof it planned or orchestrated the assault, in which 2 gunmen were killed. We know one suspect was in direct contact with a mysterious ISIS recruiter who was calling for the attack. Investigators say he's recruited at least 16 Americans to join ISIS.
To Baltimore now, where they're struggling to get back to normal following the unrest over Freddie Gray's death. One of the police officers who's facing charges now is demanding an inspection of the knife seized from Gray. The city's top prosecutor declared the arrest illegal, saying Gray was allowed to carry that type of knife under Maryland law, but the officer claims it was an illegal weapon, according to Baltimore's stricter rules.
Dozens of families forced from their homes about 50 miles northwest of New York City by a raging forest fire. They're now back home this morning. More than 2,000 acres burned, and investigators are blaming it on someone who was burning debris, violating the burn ban. The fire is now about 80% contained.
And finally, a guy snorkeling in the Colorado River saw a pair of skeletons in the water. He called authorities. They then sent a diver down to investigate, and sure enough, there they are, seated comfortably in a pair of chairs. Turns out they are fake. One of them wearing a sign with the name Bernie, a sign presumably a reference to the movie Weekend at Bernie's. Is that a funny joke?
Yeah, it's a funny joke. I mean, their boss.
It is funny.
You know, they have to carry around their dead boss for a little while, I guess. People love Weekend at Bernie's. Also, snorkeling in the Colorado River is not normal.
Not advised, folks. But you can get more news anytime at abcnews.com. I'm TJ Holmes.
And I'm Kana Whitworth. Thanks for watching.
So the police are now identifying these 2 gunmen. They say they're the roommates, Elton Simpson and Nadir Soofi. Simpson has been on the FBI's radar for nearly 10 years, but the chairman of the House Homeland Security Committee, Mike McCall, prior to the ISIS claim, said that he thinks a direct link to the group may be a bit premature.
Based on my briefings, there's no specific evidence this was directed overseas by ISIS. Rather, this is one of these sort of radicalized over the internet type individuals. This is a kind of attack, quite frankly, that we're most concerned about.
So Catherine Herridge leads our coverage. She is live in Washington. Catherine, hello to you. First, have the feds verified this claim from ISIS, and what are we learning about the links to that group?
Well, Bill, at this hour, the U.S. intelligence community is still assessing this claim of responsibility by ISIS And at the same time, investigators are doing a forensic review of the suspect's electronics as well as social media linked to the attack. A counterterrorism source tells Fox News that Twitter traffic reveals new and striking connections between at least one of the gunmen and established Twitter handles overseas, suggesting ISIS operatives had knowledge of the attack beforehand and that the same fighters either mentored or encouraged at least one of the gunmen. Within hours of the attack, established ISIS Twitter handles had timely knowledge of the attack, suggesting foreknowledge, and some of the tweets from ISIS, similar to this one, suggested contact with one of the shooters prior to the attack, using phrases such as, "We tried to reach him, but just missed him." The source said the social media appeared to show encouragement and also mentoring. This morning, we're also getting new information about this second suspect, Nadir Soofi, who, according to a Facebook account that has now been disabled, had long-standing grudges against the police and had one time studied overseas in Islamabad, Pakistan. Bill.
Well, so what do we know about this warning from law enforcement that the Texas event was indeed a target?
Well, the Republican chairman of the House Homeland Security Committee, Mike McCall, also told Fox in that exclusive interview that there was a joint FBI and Homeland Security bulletin circulated in the days leading up to the attack, and it was because of that bulletin that security had been ramped up in Garland, understanding the event was a target.
The Dutch legislator who was at the event raised the awareness of the FBI and Homeland Security to send out a joint intelligence bulletin warning in advance that there could be an attack, potential terrorist attack at this event. And I think the precautions were taken, and the good news is it was stopped.
One of the things that we're starting to see among intelligence officials is sort of an evolution of what it means to direct an attack. In this case, the early information suggests the men had, in effect, a standing order to attack, the freedom to attack when they saw fit at the best timing of their choosing. And that's pretty similar to the profile that we saw with the shooting in France at Charlie Hebdo. So it's not necessarily a direct call to act, but an understanding that they will launch the attack on behalf of a terrorist group when the time is best suited for success.
Wow, interesting stuff. Catherine, thank you. Catherine Harris leading our coverage there in Washington.
And from what I understand, and this is coming from the Associated Press, we have our crews going there. We've got KDFW, which that's our local affiliate in Dallas, bringing us this picture, this live picture that people can see. What we know is that an officer dressed in SWAT gear, at one point this evening took the stage at this event and told the attendees, including an Associated Press reporter, that a shooting had occurred. He said one officer and two suspects were shot. And that's when they started to put the place in lockdown and then feather out from there, if you will, a lockdown situation in about, from what I'm understanding, 1,000-yard radius away from this venue. And that included somehow, and I don't have a schematic of this or a map, but apparently there's a nearby Walmart store, and that also was evacuated in response to this. That would take a lot of assets in place. And Christopher, from what I'm understanding, you would anticipate that they would have already had those in place.
Right, yeah. They would have been prepared to that. They would have looked at the venue to begin with, and this is standard emergency response. You're going to draw a series of circles around any particular site, and you're going to pre-plan in advance how you're going to control that radiating out from that site. So they will have thought about the logistics, the physical difficulties they would have had to get around and the amount of people that they would have needed, and would have prepared for this in advance.
All right. So now I'm reading a little bit more about this. And, of course, now on the Associated Press wires and in other places, too, people are making their own connection. And, again, we will not do that until we can confirm it. But to contextually put this type of thing into people's minds, we remember what happened in Paris, that office of that satirical newspaper, which also was publishing a cartoon of the Prophet Muhammad. And what happened there, the 12 people who were killed there. So I understand the sensitivity, and you don't have to draw a connection there necessarily, Christopher, but just the sensitivity that people would have in terms of protecting the asset of this venue. Now, I want to look at the middle of the screen. Can we make that full right there? I want to look at that. Okay, so it appears that they have brought a robotic into scope here. And we know, Christopher, that they are looking at a vehicle that reportedly belonged to one of the suspects. Talk to me about securing the scene right now, if you will. And I don't know if you can see Fox News, but clearly you can see that there's a robot moving in the middle of the screen, one of those automated search items. Talk to me, please.
Well, they would, in preparing for all eventualities, explosives being one of them, they would have a robot there in advance, and they're simply taking all necessary precautions. It's probably too soon for them to have any specific information as to whether or not there are explosives in the car. But the best way to approach it is to treat it as if it is. That way, if they make any mistakes, their mistakes are being overly cautious instead of being careless. So they're just simply doing due diligence and taking all reasonable precautions in advance.
All right, so this coming in now from Reuters. 2 gunmen who opened fire at an anti-Islam art exhibit, is how they're calling it, featuring depictions of the Prophet Muhammad in Garland, Texas, near Dallas, were themselves dead at the scene, and they're going on. This is per Reuters commentary, obviously mixed in along with their reporting. The way that I understand it, this was a group exercising free speech, as they have said, New York-based American Freedom Defense Initiative, hosting a contest that would have awarded $10,000 for the best cartoon depicting the Prophet Muhammad at this venue. So that's what was going on. Some of the followers of Islam in the area, and this may be what you're alluding to, Christopher, had said that they thought that such drawings were deemed insulting and may have sparked some violence around the world, as you mentioned. So that may have been something that they were prepared to deal with tonight. Clearly, as we look in the center of the screen, there has been heavy police response to this double shooting outside this art exhibit. And what I'm seeing through our own reporting through KDFW is that there was an exchange of gunfire between the police officers and the 2 men, the suspects who were reported dead at this time. One of those officers was shot. A non-life-threatening wound is what we're being told, and he's been taken to the hospital.